The night air was unusually cold when I made that fateful turn onto Maple Street. My friend Eliza was passed out in the passenger seat, her head lolling against the window as I navigated the quiet suburban roads. I was exhausted, angry, and completely unaware that this simple act, driving a drunk friend home, would change the entire trajectory of my lonely life. If you've ever had one of those moments where the universe seems to shift beneath your feet, stick around. This story might just remind you that second chances come in the most unexpected packages. Hey everyone. If this is your first time here, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything to a small channel like mine, and trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. My name is Daniel Parker. 38 years old, single father to my 12-year-old daughter Lily, and owner of a failing contracting business. My wife Sarah died 4 years ago, breast cancer that spread too quickly for any of us to process. Since then, I'd been existing rather than living, focused solely on keeping Lily fed, clothed, and as emotionally stable as possible while I slowly crumbled inside. That Friday night hadn't started as anything special. My sister Angela had taken Lily for the weekend, one of her periodic attempts to give me a break, though I never knew what to do with myself when my daughter wasn't around. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I'd found myself at O'Malley's, the local bar where I occasionally met my friend Eliza Carter for drinks. Eliza and I had a complicated relationship. We'd gone to high school together, lost touch for nearly 15 years, then reconnected when she moved back to town after her divorce. She was a landscape architect, brilliant and passionate about her work. We weren't dating, neither of us was ready for that, but we'd developed a friendship based on mutual loss and single adulthood. She understood my grief in ways others didn't. That night, though, something had been different. Eliza had already been halfway through her third martini when I arrived. "Daniel," she'd exclaimed too loudly when I sat down. My knight in shining armor. Always on time. I'd noticed immediately that something was wrong. Eliza rarely drank heavily. "Everything okay?" I'd asked, signaling the bartender for just a club soda. "Fantastic," she'd replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Just celebrating another failed project pitch. Third one this month. Turns out people in this town don't actually care about sustainable landscaping." The night had devolved from there. I'd tried to get her to slow down, to talk about what was really bothering her, but Eliza had been determined to drown whatever sorrows were plaguing her. By 11, she could barely stand, and I knew I needed to get her home safely. Which is how I found myself pulling into the driveway of a modest colonial house I'd never visited before, with an unconscious friend and no idea what to do next. Eliza still lived with her mother, a temporary arrangement after her divorce. She'd always insisted, though it had been 2 years. I'd never met Mrs. Carter. Eliza rarely talked about her. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment, the silence broken only by Eliza's soft snoring. The porch light flicked on, and I saw a silhouette in the doorway. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the cold and walked around to the passenger side. "Eliza," I said softly, shaking her shoulder. "We're at your house. Come on, let's get you inside." She mumbled something unintelligible and tried to push me away. The front door opened wider, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. Even in the dim light, I could see the resemblance between her and Eliza, the same high cheekbones and elegant posture, though Mrs. Carter's hair was silver instead of Eliza's warm brown. "Need some help?" she called, her voice surprisingly youthful. "If you don't mind," I replied, trying to maneuver Eliza's limp form out of the car. "I'm Daniel, a friend of your daughter's." Mrs. Carter descended the steps quickly, moving with the grace of someone much younger than her apparent 60-something years. Up close, I could see the concern in her eyes, not just for her daughter, but something else I couldn't quite place. "Catherine Carter," she said, helping me support Eliza between us. "I've heard a lot about you, Daniel." I was surprised by that. Eliza and I never discussed our friendship much with others. All good things, I hope. Catherine gave me a small smile as we navigated the steps. She says you're one of the good ones. I can see she wasn't exaggerating. Together we managed to get Eliza inside and into what I assumed was her bedroom. Catherine efficiently removed her daughter's shoes and jacket, then pulled a blanket over her. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in this private moment. She doesn't do this often, Catherine said quietly, brushing a strand of hair from Eliza's forehead. Something must have happened. She mentioned a project that fell through, I offered. Catherine sighed. That wouldn't normally hit her this hard. There's something else going on. We stepped back into the hallway, and Catherine closed the door partially, leaving it ajar enough to hear if Eliza needed anything. Thank you for bringing her home, she said, leading me toward what turned out to be a warmly lit kitchen. It's after midnight, and you look exhausted. Would you like to stay over? We have a perfectly comfortable guest room, and I'd feel terrible sending you back out at this hour. I hesitated, thinking of my empty house. There was nothing waiting for me there except memories and silence. Still, staying in a stranger's home felt oddly intimate. I wouldn't want to impose, I said automatically. Catherine was already filling a kettle with water. Nonsense. It's the least I can offer after you took care of my daughter. Besides, she added, a shadow crossing her face, this house gets too quiet sometimes. I recognized that look, the same one I saw in my mirror every morning. Loss. Loneliness. The strange emptiness that comes when a house that should be full of life suddenly isn't. Tea? She asked, setting 2 mugs on the counter. And just like that, I found myself sitting at Catherine Carter's kitchen table at nearly 1 in the morning, drinking chamomile tea and telling her about my contracting business, about Lily, about how hard it was to be both mother and father to a girl entering her teen years. Catherine listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own experiences of raising Eliza as a widow. Her husband Robert had died of a heart attack when Eliza was 14, younger than my Lily was now. She understood the weight I carried. The hardest part, I confessed somewhere around 2 a.m., is that I never know if I'm doing it right. Sarah would have known exactly what to say when Lily came home crying about friend drama last week. I just stood there like an idiot, offering ice cream. Catherine laughed softly. Ice cream is never the wrong answer with teenage girls. And Robert would have done exactly the same thing. Her expression softened. We're all just making it up as we go along, Daniel. Even those of us who had partners to lean on. By the time she showed me to the guest room, something had shifted in my chest, a loosening of a tightness I hadn't even realized was there. For the first time in years, I'd spoken openly about my struggles with someone who truly understood, without pity or judgment. There are fresh towels in the bathroom, Catherine said, pointing down the hall. And feel free to help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you wake up before us. I thanked her awkwardly, suddenly aware of how strange this situation was, sleeping in the home of my friend's mother, a woman I'd just met. This is weird, isn't it? Catherine said, reading my thoughts with uncanny accuracy. But sometimes the universe puts people in our paths exactly when we need them. She said goodnight with a gentle pat on my arm, leaving me to wonder what exactly had just happened, and why it felt so inexplicably right. I slept better that night than I had in months. The smell of coffee and bacon woke me the next morning. For a disorienting moment, I forgot where I was, expecting to see my own bedroom walls. Instead, I found myself in a sunlit room with cream-colored walls and a quilt that smelled faintly of lavender. I checked my phone, a text from my sister confirming that Lily was having a great time at her house, with a photo of my daughter grinning over what appeared to be an elaborate breakfast spread. At least someone was enjoying their Saturday morning. After using the guest bathroom to make myself somewhat presentable, I followed the enticing aromas to the kitchen. Catherine stood at the stove, spatula in hand, humming something that sounded like an old jazz standard. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater, her silver hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. "Good morning," I said, hesitating at the threshold. She turned with a warm smile. "Perfect timing. Coffee's fresh, and the bacon is just about done. I hope you're hungry." "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," I protested, even as my stomach growled audibly. Catherine waved dismissively. "It's no trouble. I love cooking, but it's hardly worth the effort just for myself. It's nice to have someone to feed." I understood that sentiment all too well. How many times had I stared into my refrigerator, unable to summon the energy to cook a proper meal just for me, especially on the weekends Lily was away. We were halfway through what turned out to be an incredible breakfast when Eliza stumbled into the kitchen, looking pale and disoriented. She stopped abruptly when she saw me. "Daniel? What are you?" Her eyes widened as memories of the previous night apparently came rushing back. "Oh God. Good morning, sunshine," Catherine said cheerfully, pouring a large glass of water and setting it in front of her daughter. "Daniel was kind enough to bring you home last night when you were indisposed. I invited him to stay rather than send him back out so late." Eliza sank into a chair, mortification written across her features. "I am so sorry. That wasn't supposed to happen." "Don't worry about it," I said awkwardly. "We've all been there." Catherine set a plate of dry toast in front of Eliza. "Eat this, take some Advil, and then maybe you can tell us what actually happened yesterday. And don't give me that nonsense about a failed pitch." Eliza looked between her mother and me, then sighed deeply. "I saw Mike yesterday. With his new girlfriend. And their baby." The pieces clicked into place. Mike was Eliza's ex-husband, who had claimed throughout their marriage that he didn't want children, only to apparently change his mind with someone else. "Oh, honey," Catherine said softly. "It shouldn't even matter," Eliza continued, her voice tight. "We've been divorced for 2 years. I'm over him. It's just..." She trailed off, staring at her untouched toast. "It's just that he's living the life you thought you'd have together," I finished quietly. "And seeing it makes you question every reason he gave for ending your marriage." Eliza looked at me with surprise, then nodded slowly. "Exactly." She took a sip of water. "Anyway, I'm sorry you had to deal with the fallout. That was unfair to you. Friends take care of each other," I said simply. "You do the same for me." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that, but something had fundamentally changed in our dynamics. Catherine insisted I take home a container of leftover pancakes for Lily, and before I knew it, I'd somehow agreed to return the following weekend to help with some repairs around their house. Apparently the bathroom sink had been leaking for months. As I was leaving, Catherine pressed a piece of paper into my hand. "My number," she explained. "In case you ever need to talk. Or if Lily needs a woman's perspective on anything. Sometimes it's easier to discuss certain things with someone who isn't your parent." I stared at the paper, oddly touched. "Thank you. That's really kind." "It's entirely selfish, I assure you," she replied with a small smile. "I miss having people around. This house is too big for just 2 people, especially when one of them is rarely home." On the drive back to my empty house, I realized I was smiling, actually smiling, for what felt like the first time in years. Something about Catherine's straightforward kindness and Eliza's vulnerable honesty had cracked open a door I'd thought was permanently sealed. That weekend marked the beginning of something none of us could have anticipated. What started as an awkward overnight stay gradually evolved into a genuine friendship between not just Eliza and me, but Catherine as well. I fixed the leaking sink the following Saturday, with Lily in tow. My daughter and Catherine had bonded instantly over a shared love of vintage mystery novels, spending hours discussing Agatha Christie while I wrestled with plumbing. Over the weeks that followed, our families began to intertwine in ways I never would have expected. Sunday dinners became a tradition, sometimes at my house, more often at the Carters, where Catherine's cooking put my basic dad meals to shame. Eliza helped Lily start a small garden in our backyard. Catherine volunteered to pick Lily up from school on days when my work ran late. For the first time since Sarah died, I felt like I could breathe again. Like we were part of something larger than our small, broken family unit. But relationships, even platonic ones, are never simple, and ours was no exception. The first complication arose about 2 months after that fateful night, when rumors began spreading through our small town that I was dating Eliza. Or Catherine. Or possibly both. Mr. Parker? Lily's math teacher had pulled me aside after a parent-teacher conference. I just wanted to say it's wonderful to see you moving forward. Lily seems much happier lately. I'd stared at her blankly. I'm sorry. Your new relationship, she'd clarified, looking suddenly uncertain. Lily mentioned you're seeing someone. A landscape architect? The misunderstanding might have been funny if it hadn't highlighted the complexity of what was developing between our families. Eliza and I were just friends, though I'd be lying if I said I hadn't considered the possibility of more. But there was also Catherine, who had become something between a mother figure and a peer to me, someone who understood my struggles and offered wisdom without judgment. The second complication was more serious. My business was failing, and I couldn't hide it anymore. Construction projects had dried up in our economically struggling town, and I'd been operating at a loss for months, draining my savings to keep afloat. I'd hidden the extent of the problem from everyone, including Lily. But one Sunday evening, as we were finishing dinner at the Carters, Catherine had looked at me with her penetrating gaze and asked simply, "What's wrong, Daniel? And don't tell me it's nothing." The whole story had spilled out then, the mounting debts, the lack of new contracts, my fear of losing our house, of failing Lily, of being unable to provide the stability she deserved after already losing her mother. Instead of pity, I'd received practical help. Catherine, it turned out, had worked in banking before retirement and had connections throughout the region. Eliza knew developers who needed reliable contractors. Within weeks, they'd helped me restructure my debts and secure enough new business to keep the company alive. You don't have to do everything alone, Catherine had told me firmly. That's the lesson it took me years to learn after Robert died. Accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The third and perhaps most complicated issue emerged gradually, as spring turned to summer. Lily, who had initially thrived with the addition of the Carters in our lives, began to withdraw. She was quieter at our Sunday dinners, less enthusiastic about spending time with Eliza, and occasionally even disrespectful toward Catherine. The breaking point came one Friday evening when I suggested Lily stay with the Carters while I completed an emergency job out of town. "No," she'd shouted, startling me with her vehemence. "I'll go to Aunt Angela's. I don't want to stay with them." "Lily, what's going on?" I'd asked, completely baffled. "I thought you liked spending time with Catherine and Eliza." My daughter had looked at me with tears in her eyes. "You're trying to replace Mom," she'd said, her voice breaking. "You're building this whole new family and forgetting about her. About us." The accusation had hit me like a physical blow. Was that what I'd been doing? Creating a substitute for what we'd lost? "Lily," I'd said carefully, sitting beside her on the couch. "No one could ever replace your mom. Not ever." "Then why are we always with them?" she demanded. "Why does Catherine get to help with my science project and give me advice about friends and do all the things Mom should be doing?" It was a fair question, and one I hadn't fully examined myself. In my eagerness to accept the support and connection the Carters offered, had I been dishonoring Sarah's memory? Had I been allowing Catherine to step into a role that should remain empty out of respect for the woman who should still be here? That conversation had led to a difficult but necessary period of reflection and recalibration. Lily and I started seeing a family therapist who specialized in grief. Catherine respectfully stepped back, understanding Lily's need to process her feelings without feeling pressured. Eliza and I continued our friendship, but with clearer boundaries. Through those therapy sessions, Lily was able to articulate fears I hadn't realized she was carrying, that she was forgetting details about her mother, that embracing new people in our lives meant betraying Sarah's memory, that if I ever remarried, her connection to her mother would somehow be diminished. "Your mom will always be your mom," I'd told her during one tearful session. "Nothing and no one can ever change that. And part of honoring her memory is allowing ourselves to be happy, to build connections with other people who care about us." "Would Mom be mad?" Lily had asked in a small voice. "About Catherine and Eliza?" I'd considered the question seriously. "Your mom loved you more than anything in the world. All she would want is for you to be surrounded by people who care about you and make you feel safe. She'd be grateful to Catherine for being there for you in ways that I, as your dad, sometimes can't be." It took time, months of careful conversations, of reassurances, of balancing our relationships with the Carters against our need to preserve and honor Sarah's memory. We created a special space in our home dedicated to Sarah, with photos and mementos that kept her presence alive in our daily lives. Gradually, Lily began to understand that adding new people to our world didn't diminish the importance of those we'd lost. By Christmas, nearly a year after that fateful night when I'd driven a drunk Eliza home, we had found a new equilibrium. The Carters joined us for Christmas Eve dinner, bringing warmth and laughter to a holiday that had been painfully difficult since Sarah's death. As I watched Catherine teaching Lily how to properly crimp a pie crust, something Sarah had always done, I felt not guilt but gratitude. Sarah would have approved of this woman who treated our daughter with such gentle care. Later that evening, as Eliza and Lily debated the merits of various Christmas movies, Catherine joined me on the porch where I'd stepped out for a moment of quiet reflection. "You've built something beautiful here, Daniel," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "Out of so much pain." I looked at her thoughtfully. "We all have. I couldn't have done it without you and Eliza." Catherine smiled, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. "Life rarely gives us what we expect. Robert's death nearly destroyed me. Having Eliza move back home in her 30s after a painful divorce wasn't in my plans. But sometimes the broken pieces create a more interesting pattern than the original design." Her words resonated deeply. The family we had created wasn't conventional, a widower and his daughter, a divorced woman and her widowed mother, bound together not by blood or romantic attachment but by genuine care and shared understanding of loss. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't driven Eliza home that night?" I asked. Catherine laughed softly. "Oh, I'd have found some other way to adopt you both. I'm very determined when I set my mind to something." As we stood there in comfortable silence, watching snow begin to fall, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, relationships rarely are, but for the first time since Sarah's death, I could envision a future filled with more than just survival. A future with connection, with joy, with the kind of extended family that forms not from obligation but from choice. Inside, I could hear Lily laughing at something Eliza said. The sound washed over me like a blessing. My daughter was healing, finding her way through grief toward a life that honored her mother while embracing new possibilities. "We should go in," Catherine said after a moment. "Before they eat all the pie without us." As I opened the door for her, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for that cold night nearly a year ago, for Eliza's uncharacteristic overindulgence, for Catherine's simple invitation to stay, and for my own willingness to accept help when it was offered. Sometimes the most significant turning points in our lives don't announce themselves with fanfare. They arrive quietly, disguised as small acts of kindness or simple decisions made in the moment. It's only in looking back that we recognize them for what they were, the first steps on a new path, leading us toward healing we couldn't have imagined. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, I want to thank you. Life after loss can feel impossibly lonely, but sharing our journeys, even with strangers on the internet, reminds us that we're never truly alone. Whatever grief or challenge you're facing, I hope you'll remain open to unexpected connections. The people who will help you rebuild your life might already be in your path, waiting for the moment when your broken pieces align with theirs. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Until next time, this is Daniel Parker, reminding you that second chances come in unexpected packages, and that the families we build can be every bit as meaningful as those we're born into.